Oh, there we go, live. All the way live.
Dude, you got
So
issues.
good evening. We just silly in season 3 of this here Double S project, the fantasy football extension of the Double S project. I'm Previn Taylor, IW, as the fantasy professional banner says, at the Double S project. With me is my man Pete Double S Dukes, Lord of all things fantasy football, also at the Double S project.
Yeah, Lord of Lord, King of Kings. Right. Speaking of that, go check out that Straight Outta Compton movie. That's pretty good. If anybody's listening out there, it's a pretty good movie. They do show the
Yeah.
DLC parts in it, but anyway, back to the subject at
Not
hand.
crashing the Z, not crashing the Z.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh man, that's just. Thoughts and prayers for that Z.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So here we
Right.
are. Um, we're here to discuss some fantasy football for all the fantasy football junkies out there. Um, our approach is this: between myself and Pete, both of us experienced commissioners, experienced players. I've been playing fantasy football since 1997.
Okay.
And Pete, you got into it back when?
I think
About
90,
eight.
99,
Something.
yep, 99, 2000 season.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a lot of years of experienced fantasy football right there, and between the two of us, and I can tell you, between the two of us, we've won about every which way possible, and speaking for myself, I've lost about every which way possible too. So we think we can perform a community service here with the Double S Project Fantasy Football. You know, sitting down weekly, discussing what's going on, little how tos, maybe some advice, just some perspective, if nothing else. We also want to reach people kind of on the beginner level because even though the game is exploded, who knows how many millions of people playing fantasy football, even in the daily leagues with some of the money, big money riding on the line. At every year, you got who knows how many thousands trying it out for the very first time. And the league that I'm running right now, the Double S Project League, we do have a first time player with us. He resisted for years and years and years since I've been working with him for over 10 years. And we finally got him in. So we had a draft last weekend. And he's all fired up. And fortunately, none of his players were Kelvin Benjamin.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. So one of the things we wanted to make sure we did this time around in the season is kind of talk about some of the basic points that could, like you said, win or lose it for you even early on in the process. And I think one of the topics we wanted to get across today was understanding how to look at your league rules and then using those rules to your advantage as far as drafting and waiver moves down the line. I mean, with Previn, like said, all the years that we've been playing, there's been so many different styles of leagues with different options, keeper options, different types of rules, bonuses. And so we just wanted to kind of discuss a few points around that just to make sure when someone offers you a chance to join their league, then you can know the things to look for. And then, like you said, use that to your advantage to make sure you draft a pretty decent team to have a chance. So.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, Prev, as far as let's just use your current situation with the league that you have, you want to talk about as far as anything specific about the rules or anything that you put emphasis on?
It's a Yahoo League. I tweak basically, and I was explaining to a couple of my guys. Some of them are a little more experienced than others. Some of them have been with me in other leagues before as well. But in mind with the new guy, there was some philosophies that's actually kind of a carryover going back to the early aughts. Sounds like a dinosaur sort of league here, where in this day and age of specialization, running back by committee, a handful of quote unquote elite quarterbacks, um, a dearth at the tight end position this year. What I've always tried to do is tweak the scoring just a little bit so that if you come up short in drafting in one position, you can kind of make up for it with value with the other position. So when I explain that, or at least I try to the best of my ability, to guys that I haven't played with before when I'm starting up a new league, saying, hey, look, you get that invitation and you accept it. First thing I would like for you to do is to go and look at the scoring and try and get an understanding for scoring, how that works, because that's going to be the basis for how you approach your draft. And even if you're, especially if you're experienced, you've been through it. You've seen some things. Maybe you've actually played with a full functioning physical rule book. Pete and I know how that works. How many pages is that one up to, man?
I don't know. We've actually scaled it down. That was just too much.
Okay, yeah, that thing had gotten pretty big. But in the most part, lately, with the basic rules, basic standard fantasy rules, we don't even go with a rule book. Without keepers, there's not really a whole lot of extra indexes and other applications. Most importantly, you don't have to really worry about a whole lot of loopholes like we used to do as your rules get more complicated. So with it being pretty simple, you have a couple tweaks that might provide a little extra value to a tight end. For example, PPR, or points per pass. Well, excuse me, points per reception.
Right.
Excuse me. So where you have a player that might not score a lot of touchdowns, but generate a decent number of yards somewhere in the median, but he's a high volume, like a Wes Welker or a slot guy. If you get that in a PPR format, that's the sort of player that can clean up, even though he might not be one of those top tier wide receivers like a Dez Bryant.
And I want to piggyback on that as well, as far as some of the leagues also have the rules of touches and carries where you get points. So maybe you get a chance to draft a Marshawn Lynch or Adrian Peterson's coming back, who are going to get you a couple of touchdowns here and there and pretty decent. Maybe you could draft a guy like Darren Sproles, and maybe you don't necessarily want him using him as your number one, but he might get number one numbers because he's going to get passes thrown to him. He may get touches as far as special teams. So if that league has something around the touches or catches or receptions or whatever per point, that person's going to just get the benefit of the doubt because they're going to be used in the offense a lot more for catching as well as running. So you got to take into consideration that. And like you said, receivers, that that possession receiver, like back in the day, Wes Welker used to clean up in receptions, points per receptions. He used to clean up, and then he became a touchdown guy as well. So he was, you don't look at a Wes Welker or somebody like that as in this era will be somebody like an Antonio Brown, who's not a big receiver, but he gets about 12 balls thrown at him every game from Roethlisberger. He's going to catch 8 or 9 of those balls. 1 or 2 are going to be touchdowns, and he's going to get a lot of yards and yards after the catch. So you got to take into consideration those little bonuses that may, sway your picks here in that second or third round about this one guy. You're like, I wouldn't normally take this receiver, but this particular league, I might take him just, in the third round or the fourth round and get him a little earlier than what you normally would do. So,
yeah. So, kind of touching on the commissioner's corner side, if you're going to keep that in mind when you're putting together your league, you might want to structure it depending on how many people you intend to have in your league as well, because for the most part, you start off at a basis of 8 to 12 to even as many as 16. I can tell you, nobody wants to play in an 18 league. That's everybody should have an outstanding team with 8 teams. 10 teams, everybody should be able to accrue enough talent to compete. It just comes down to the skill level and management. So in my opinion, while 12 and 15 are highly competitive and can really test your acumen, you can also probably get a good mental workout on a 10-team league, especially if there's a lot of experience in that 10-team league, because everybody has a lot of players and everybody can probably manage a roster fairly well. So there's going to be some other little nuances that you kind of have to learn to adapt, maybe looking within the rule books or not. But in that case, you still got 10 people that are pretty much operating at the same level. So everybody should have a chance to compete. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, and from that perspective too, you have to take in consideration the and this is getting a little bit next level for some of the commissioners, maybe beyond the new commissioners, but the commissioners out there that may be doing this for 2 or 3 years now. What you're probably seeing is even within a year-to-year transition of the league, you have to somewhat take in consideration the rules relative to the style of the game. So, in a lot of leagues, early on, I would say maybe 10 years ago, we kind of switched over and most leagues were only giving 4 points for quarterbacks touchdowns. And we actually switched over and changed the rules in one of our leagues to 6. Well, now with the league kind of switching back now to more of a passing attack, you may want to consider scaling it back down or leaving it at 4, which most leagues do. So just little things like that, to try to keep the competitive balance there, because no one wants to have a situation where something is worth. Hey, look, we get it. Peyton Manning or Brady or Aaron Rodgers throw for 50 touchdowns. It is what it is. 4 points or 6 points is not going to make that much of a difference, but it may make a difference with that next tier guy like a Phillip Rivers or a Romo, where if you gave an extra few points per touchdown or even extra points per passing yardage, over 30 yards, over 40 yards, over 50 yards. I've seen that in a lot of leagues. And
it adds value to those second tier and even third tier guys. I mean, it's the difference between a guy being playable and unplayable.
Right. And it's fine. So those are the things you want to make sure you say, okay, do we really want to have this rule in? Like you said, it could be relative to the 10-team or 12-team league because, like you said, within a 10-team league, you should have a pretty decent squad. It's just a matter of picking and choosing one, maybe 2 players per week over another player. In an 8-team league, you're going to have a set roster probably until somebody gets hurt.
I'm just going to say it. Nobody should play in the 8-team league.
I wouldn't even suggest that because it gives a false indication of what you really are going to have to learn and do once you start expanding yourself out to 10, 12.
It kind of gets a false indication of fantasy football.
It does. It actually does. That would be, if there's one thing you take away from this episode this week is that we suggest that you don't play in an 8-team league. If you can't find a 10-team league and there's an 8-team, find 2 other people to just manage 2 teams or something. Just play in a 10-team league.
Get your dog, get your drunk uncle, get somebody in there.
Let your son help out, whatever.
Let your son. Believe me, a lot of people will do exactly that. They get the 8-year-old kid in. So kind of moving on to preparing for your draft. But my thing for the last few years, you're in a league. First of all, get onto the website that you're associated with. We're not in the dark ages anymore. Nobody plays off internet anymore. Get into your website, explore that website, kind of get a feel for the layout. Get and do the mock drafts if you get a chance. I'm in a Yahoo league, a couple of Yahoo leagues actually, and I tested it out in 12-team mock drafts, basically trying to get myself across various draft positions, early in the round, middle of the round, late in the round, to try and get a feel for who is being drafted and where, to sort of be able to set up certain draft board scenarios. Then having done that, you can maybe adjust the ranking system that the websites provide into your own draft board to kind of fit the structure based on what you think you may see. Now, keep in mind, Yahoo, for the most part, unless you do a manual setup on your draft, it's all randomized, so you don't know what your draft position is going to be until you get in 20-something odd minutes before the draft. But if you've done the mocks and you have some printouts or, have taken even some notes or something like that, you can kind of form a picture of, okay, I'm at 10. I've already practiced for this. I'm at 11. I practiced for this. Particularly if you're looking at a snake order, which is 1 through 2, 3, 4, 5, 11, 12, then 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, on the way back down to 1 every other round. So that's my big suggestion. I suggested that to the newer guys and the guys that I've been working with for the first time in this particular league. Try and check out the site, get familiarized with the layout, do the mock drafts, work within that website draft board layout, in doing the mock draft. So when it's time for the real thing, it's not like you're looking at something for the first time.
Yeah, I mean that comes with the territory of understanding your rules as well, because and there are most leagues are snake draft order. Some are standard league standard, which means you go 1 through 12, and then it comes back to 1 for the 13th pick. But to Previn's, to his point, getting familiar with the draft boards, getting familiar with the sites, understanding, looking at their and taking in consideration also, and this is just a piece of advice is that those pre-rankings are a lot of times based on the
Straight standard points.
Yeah, well, just straight standard points, but it's also you have to make sure that if there's anything tweaked inside the rule books or inside the rules, like we talked about, as far as bonus points per long, catches over certain distances for receivers or quarterbacks throwing passes, that you adjust those rankings based on maybe your experience. Now, for new people, a lot of times the experience is going to be a little biased towards certain players, maybe even a certain team that you feel that their player is going to be better than what they probably are ranked to be better. And that's okay. Fantasy football is also about fun. If you have some favorite players that you want to go after and you want to have on your team, favorite teams, but I think from the standpoint of advice, talking like I say with a Dolphins fan, I know there's certain years and I'm not going to pick Dolphin receivers. I'm not going to pick a Dolphin running back or quarterback. It's just I'm not going to pick any Dolphins. Maybe their defense. This year might be a little different. We can talk about that in another episode. But the bottom line is, you want to make sure that you get familiar with those rankings, and then go ahead and put your flavor on maybe 1 or 2 guys, because what you'll see is that when those mock drafts, they're going to be people making opinionated draft, picks, and then you're going to be able to maybe be in a position to get a more value pick based on the fact that someone else took a pick relative to their biased nature. So that would be a piece of advice, is that make sure you pay attention to those rankings, put your own flavor on it based on what you feel, and then have fun with it. I mean, it is what it is. It's fantasy football. I mean,
right. And there's no way. And look, the conception is you got experts on TV, you got experts on the internet. You got me and Pete here talking about giving advice like, we got all this experience, so are we experts? I don't know if we're experts, but I tell you what, there's no one way to win in fantasy football.
Nope.
And there's no right, wrong way to approach putting together your team. There's some efficiencies and stuff like that, but there's certainly a zillion ways to lose. It ain't really it doesn't always have a whole lot to do with, whether you are smart or dumb or whatever have you. So to touch on what Pete is saying about put your own flavor on it. Look, I've been doing this for so long, and I told a guy last week, I said, you know what? The rankings are what the rankings are. But if there's somebody you really like and really think that can make your team better, do not be afraid to reach on them. Take them 2 rounds early. Just grab them. If you want him, if that's what you want, take him. Don't sit and wait, because it's going to come back to bite you. And I know that from experience.
Yeah, no, you just take them. I mean, like I said, the bottom line of doing the fantasy football, like people get competitive, get real competitive about it, and real upset about when they lose and all these things. But if you don't have fun with this, what's the point? And and I know people, there's some leagues out there, money leagues, whatever, but you got to have fun with this. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to be the one looking at this roster every week. You're going to be looking at football every week. You're going to be a part of the process.
You're going to be that dude up in church at 12:30. Pastor ain't closed out yet, and you trying to get that lineup in.
Right. So I think we may cut it there. What we want to talk about, I say, coming up in the next episode, in the future, we want to talk about basically in the sense of when you've got your players and your teams drafted, kind of early management as far as managing your teams.
Hey, let me interject here on that.
What's up?
Hey, look, next episode, let's talk about the draft, because next episode is next week, and a lot of leagues still will not have drafted yet. We actually had an early draft, and there's a rationale to why it was so early, but not everybody else. He disagrees, but there was a rationale. You'd be amazing how many people are taking the kids to college nights. Oh yeah, that was Pete. So yeah, but yeah, availability. Yeah. So next week we can talk about the draft. You know, what happens during a draft, those moments in the draft, decision making in the draft, that sort of thing. I think we can do that next week.
Yeah, you want to talk about what happened with you?
Oh, I don't need to go into what happened with me. We can just say that right now, unmitigated disaster. But
That's what you want to talk about.
nah, I don't
Okay.
have to do that with me next week. That's already beating the dead horse. So
All right.
we can talk
Well,
about how people cannot do what I did.
well, let's do that. Let's do
Yeah.
that because I'm sure there's a lot of examples and people out there wanting to hear. So,
Yep.
all right.
All
We're
right
gonna.
then.
I'll let you
So
sign off. Go ahead,
yeah,
man.
look for us. Yeah, look for us next week. We'll tweet out the in advance. Hey, we're coming. We're getting ready to get on Double S Project Fantasy Football. See this on YouTube. Hit the like button, please. Tell your friends about us. Share the links, etc., etc., etc.
And also, there's some suggestions on some things you guys want to get, some more specifics, or anybody want to get on and log on and watch the show, some Q&A. Just get on there and just ask us whatever questions. We'll start. We'll definitely be checking that and
Yeah,
answer whatever
absolutely.
questions we got.
All right.
All right.
So that's it for me, man.
Peace out, man.
All right.
Later.